Old black man told to get lost. In a fancy restaurant, they laughed until his identity is revealed. Welcome, dear viewers, to a story that will take you on a journey through opulent halls, dark secrets, and the resilience of a man whose identity transcends appearances. Within the gilded walls of a prestigious New York restaurant, an unassuming elderly black gentleman is dismissed with cruel indifference, told to leave simply because he does not fit the expected mold. Yet, unbeknownst to those who sneer at him, his true significance is far greater than they could ever imagine. As you watch this tale unfold, prepare for each step to reveal unexpected plot twists that will keep you guessing until the final chapter. Lush in its details, this story speaks of hidden mysteries, karmic justice, and the enduring power of kindness and respect. So sit back and immerse yourself in a world where superficial judgments can have life-altering consequences, and where every moment might change everything. Before we dive in, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. If you're excited about this story, let us know. If you enjoyed the video, press 1. If not, press O. Your feedback really inspires me to gather more uplifting and meaningful stories. High above the hustle and bustle of Manhattan, the swanky restaurant known as the Majestic Rose reigned supreme. Located near Central Park, the establishment boasted glittering chandeliers from Prague and velvet drapes imported from Italy. Word on the street was that New York's elite media moguls, Wall Street titans, foreign dignitaries flocked to this reservation-only culinary haven. From the delicate amuse-bouche to the decadent chocolate soufflé, everything about the Majestic Rose was designed to make patrons feel like royalty. One chilly Friday evening, an elderly black gentleman named Horace stepped inside. He wore a crisp yet modest suit, the cuffs frayed and the shoes well worn. The moment he crossed the threshold, the hostess, a sharply dressed woman named Madison, looked him up and down with blatant disapproval. Guests filtered around Horace in a flurry of designer labels, Chanel scarves, Louis Vuitton handbags, and the occasional Rolex glimmering under the ambient light. Madison plastered on a prim smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good evening, sir," she said, her tone clipped. "May I help you?" Horace nodded politely. His soft voice barely rose above the murmur of the restaurant. "I have a reservation here for tonight." He held out his phone, an older model that looked hopelessly outdated next to the parade of brand new iPhones. Madison's eyes flitted across the phone screen, and a faint look of skepticism crossed her perfectly made-up face. In the background, live piano music played softly. Couples dined at candlelit tables, one pair whispering sweet nothings, another immersed in business talk. Waiters in crisp tuxedos navigated between tables with choreographed grace, delivering plates garnished with gold flakes. Meanwhile, Horace stood at the front, feeling each second stretch to an eternity under Madison's cold scrutiny. When she discovered no reservation under Horace's name, her lips curved into something resembling a sneer. "I'm sorry, Mr. Horace, is it? There must be some mistake. We don't seem to have you on our list." The condescension in her voice was unmistakable. Horace tried to explain that he had booked days ago and even had confirmation emails, but Madison cut him off, her voice echoing loud enough for a few curious onlookers to pause mid-conversation. "Perhaps you should try somewhere else, sir. We don't accept walk-ins who can't adhere to the dress code." A small crowd began to form in the foyer, curiosity piqued by the tension between Madison and the old man. Seated nearby at the sleek marble bar was a silver-haired lawyer named Leonard Blackwood, famous for representing Hollywood stars. He sipped a glass of Macallan 18 and silently observed the unfolding drama. Next to him, an up-and-coming social media influencer, Dahlia Crest, held her phone up, capturing everything for her Instagram story. Horace's voice remained steady. "I assure you, ma'am, I made the reservation under my name, Horace Templeton. This is the confirmation from your website." He tapped at his old phone, but the screen froze, refusing to cooperate. The restaurant's overhead lighting gleamed off the phone's cracked screen. Madison arched an impeccably shaped eyebrow. "You don't seem to understand," Madison said sharply. "We have a strict policy here, and it's very likely you found yourself a fake confirmation or have come on the wrong date. Maybe your phone's old software messed something up. Chuckles rippled through a group of onlookers clearly. They found the situation entertaining. At that moment, a tall, broad-shouldered manager wearing a polished name tag that read Christopher Cole approached. He was carrying himself with the assurance of a man who believed his domain was unassailable. "Is there a problem here, Madison?" he asked. She turned to him with the faintest smirk. "Mr. Cole, this man claims he has a reservation, but his name isn't in our system. He also appears to be unfamiliar with our dress code." Christopher eyed Horace's worn suit and scuffed shoes, then took in the older phone with clear disdain. Horace tried again, more urgently now. "I've come a long way, and tonight is supposed to be very important. If you just allow me a moment to refresh the web page or check the confirmation number, I'm sure we can clear this up." Christopher folded his arms. His posture screamed authority. "Sir," he said in a tone usually reserved for unruly children, "we have a lot of VIPs who need this space tonight. You can't just come in off the street, claim you have a reservation, and expect us to move mountains. We're extremely busy, especially on a Friday." In the crowd, Dahlia continued filming as snickers grew louder. A few malicious whispers found their way to Horace's ears. Who does he think he is? And he should know better than to come here. Horace clenched his jaw, maintaining his dignity despite the humiliation. "I only ask you to double-check. This is a misunderstanding," he insisted. Yet the staff seemed entirely uninterested in verifying anything further. Christopher waved a dismissive hand. "Madison, kindly escort this gentleman out if he persists in loitering. We don't have time for such nonsense." Madison stepped forward, her expression rife with contempt. Before Horace could protest, she hissed, "I'll show you the exit, sir. Let's not disturb our esteemed guest any longer." Suddenly, a young server named Colton, who had been refilling water glasses at nearby tables, dared to intervene. He was a fresh graduate from the Culinary Institute of America, eager to make a good impression at his job, but something about the situation tugged at his conscience. "Actually, Mr. Cole," Colton ventured, his voice wavering slightly, "I recall seeing an email from someone named Horace Templeton earlier today. It was about a reservation for a special occasion. I'm not certain, but I think it might still be." He never got to finish. Christopher shot him a withering glare, effectively shutting him down. "Colton, that's enough. You're overstepping." With a respectful nod, Colton backed away, though not before offering Horace an apologetic glance. It was a small kindness in a sea of antagonism. Madison took Horace's arm and began ushering him away. By now, the small commotion had attracted even more attention, with some patrons craning their necks from the tables to watch the spectacle. Horace tried to resist politely, but Madison's grip tightened. "Let's go, sir," she snarled under her breath. Then the unthinkable happened. Horace's foot caught on the edge of the plush red carpet, causing him to stumble. He pitched forward, colliding with one of the waiters carrying a tray laden with a vintage bottle of Dom Perignon. The glass shattered against the marble floor with an explosive crash, and the contents worth hundreds of dollars spilled everywhere. A collective gasp swept through the lounge area. All eyes locked on Horace. Champagne soaked his suit and the tips of his well-worn leather shoes. Madison drew back instantly, eyes wide with horror. Christopher immediately snapped his fingers at a busboy to clean the mess, while an outraged hush fell over the room. Horace grimaced, bowing his head in embarrassment. "I'm so sorry. That was entirely my fault," he murmured, trying to stoop down and help. But the manager barked, "Don't touch anything. You've done enough." Several guests laughed openly now, filming with their phones. Horace's cheeks burned with shame, but there was a spark in his eyes, one that hinted he was quietly noting each unkind face, each scornful stare. As Horace stood there, dripping with expensive champagne and insults, a tall, elegant woman pushed through the onlookers. Her name was Veronica Langford, a society columnist for the New York Times. She had just arrived at the Majestic Rose to cover a high-profile engagement dinner for an international business magnate, but what she saw before her was far more intriguing. Her keen reporter's instincts kicked into gear. "Excuse me," Veronica said, stepping forward. "Are you all right?" She directed her question to Horace, though she kept a wary eye on Christopher and Madison. Horace nodded, flustered, trying to maintain a shred of dignity. Veronica then turned to Christopher. I saw the whole thing. Is this gentleman being thrown out because he accidentally spilled a drink? I was under the impression the Majestic Rose prided itself on hospitality. Christopher's face stiffened. MAAM, this gentleman shouldn't have been here in the first place. He claims to have a reservation, but we can't confirm it. We run a tight ship. If he's caused damage or disrupted our guests, we have every right to escort him out. Veronica's lips pursed. She'd seen this scenario play out before, in countless forms. A ripple of distaste for such prejudice welled up in her. Surely you must have a more compassionate approach, she said diplomatically. Mistakes happen. Before Christopher could respond, Horace quietly said to Veronica, I appreciate your concern, but I don't want to cause more trouble than necessary. He bowed his head humbly. Still, the humiliation etched in his eyes was unmistakable. Just as the spectacle threatened to escalate further, the overhead lights flickered for a brief moment, an electrical glitch perhaps, or some wiring issue. Startled gasps and exclamations rippled through the crowd. Oddly, it seemed to shift the atmosphere from scornful to uneasy. Horace took advantage of the brief distraction. I'll leave, he said, voice subdued yet firm. The hush that had fallen was broken by Christopher's sneer. Yes, I believe you should. We have no place for, he cut himself off, though the suggestion of people like you hung heavily in the air. Horace cast a final glance around the room, his eyes meeting Colton's in a moment of silent gratitude. Then he quietly turned and walked toward the exit, a dozen smug smirks trailing after him. If only they knew who they had just tossed out so callously. The moment Horace disappeared through the glass doors, the restaurant's atmosphere tried to return to normal, but an undercurrent of tension remained. Colton resumed serving tables, although he was visibly rattled, guilt written all over his face. Veronica, too, found herself unable to focus on the assignment that had brought her there. She kept replaying the scene in her mind, the unkind words, the dismissive sneers, and Horace's quiet resignation. Meanwhile, Christopher stood near the entrance, arms crossed, surveying the restaurant like a hawk ensuring order. Madison sidled up next to him. That man could have been anyone, she muttered. For all we know, he was trying to scam us. Christopher nodded, but his gaze wandered toward the door. He wore a smug look, convinced of his own correctness. Suddenly, a flamboyantly dressed gentleman named Maurice Devereaux waltzed in. Maurice was a well-known event planner for various Fortune 500 companies. He had a reservation for that evening to finalize details for a gala. Christopher, Maurice exclaimed, arms wide. Long time no see. I hope you've got the best table for me tonight. I'm finalizing the upcoming charity gala details, and rumor has it the moneyed crowd wants to impress some big names. Christopher forced a smile. Of course, Mr. Devereaux. We always have the best for you. Everything's set for next month's event. Maurice nodded excitedly, rummaging in his shimmering Gucci satchel for some documents. Yes, we're in the final stages. And we might be getting a major philanthropic sponsor, someone big, from out of state. I've been hearing that he's extremely wealthy, a self-made success, and an avid supporter of minority entrepreneurs. Can't recall his full name, but he's rumored to have roots in Harlem. At the mention of Harlem, Madison's ears pricked up. She recalled Horace's accent. Could it be the same man? She quickly brushed aside the thought. Surely that old man couldn't be the philanthropic powerhouse Maurice was referencing. She and Christopher exchanged an amused glance, as if silently laughing at the possibility. Maurice continued, the sponsor is rumored to be a reclusive billionaire. A friend told me he once taught as a professor at Howard University before making it big in tech. He's set to donate millions to local charities. Our gala is banking on his presence. It'll be the talk of the town if he shows up. Tucking the papers away, he added, but hush hush, okay? This is top secret until it's all confirmed. The conversation was interrupted by the cling of fine china. A waiter accidentally dropped a plate, snapping everyone's attention back. Maurice blinked, then turned to Christopher. Anyway, I'm sure everything is in order. Let's settle my dinner so we can finalize these details. And with that, they moved away, leaving Madison to wonder if the philanthropic man from Harlem was connected to Horace Templeton, the elderly gentleman they had just humiliated. Still, she dismissed the thought. After all, how could an old man with tattered shoes be a benefactor of million-dollar charities? Outside the majestic Rose, Horace exhaled slowly into the frigid night air, the swirl of city lights reflected in his still damp jacket. People hurried by, ignoring him or shooting curious glances at the man who appeared to have just faced a humiliating ordeal. Yet Horace's expression was more thoughtful than forlorn. He pulled out his phone once more, carefully scrolling through old messages until he found the one he needed. He pressed a number labeled simply driver. Within moments, a sleek black Bentley pulled up to the curb. The driver, a stoic fellow named Benjamin, hopped out to open the door for Horace. "Good evening, Dr. Templeton," Benjamin said, concern clouding his features. "Are you all right? You look shaken." Horace offered a thin smile. "I'm fine, Ben. Just a little run-in with misguided folks." As he settled into the plush leather interior, Horace cast a final glance at the majestic Rose's glowing sign. "I'm not angry," he murmured to himself, "just disappointed." The Bentley wove through Manhattan traffic, eventually crossing over to the wealthy enclaves near the Upper West Side. After passing a row of pricey brownstones, the car entered a discreet gate that led to a private townhouse. It was an unassuming facade. By design, Horace valued his privacy above all else. But inside, the home was meticulously renovated, blending historical charm with modern luxury. Art from various African-American painters adorned the walls. Jacob Lawrence, Alma Thomas, Romare Bearden. A quiet hush pervaded the space, as though it were a refuge from the tumult of the city. In his study, Horace sank into a leather armchair and opened his laptop. He navigated to an encrypted email account, one he used for philanthropic dealings. A fresh email from Maurice Devereaux sat at the top of his inbox, confirming the next steps for an upcoming charity gala. "I wonder if they'll realize who I am before I show up to that event," he mused. But for now, he decided to keep his identity discreet. Let them find out in due time or not at all. He poured himself a small glass of whiskey, a label from a distillery he'd once invested in. It was a reminder of how far he'd come from humble beginnings. As he sipped, his mind wandered back to the scene at the restaurant. The laughter, the disdain, the assumption that he, a well-dressed but older black man, couldn't possibly afford or deserve a seat at such an establishment. Something twisted in his chest, a tangle of hurt and resolve. If only they knew, he whispered to the quiet room. If only they knew. Back at the majestic Rose, the evening had progressed in typical lavish fashion. Plates piled high with gourmet delicacies emerged from the kitchen. The wine list, featuring bottles that cost more than a year's rent in some parts of the city, flowed freely. Yet a subtle tension still lingered. Whispers about the old black man fiasco circulated among staff. Some regarded it with smug satisfaction. How dare he presume he belonged there? Others felt uneasy about the blatant bias they'd witnessed. Colton, the young server who'd tried to speak up, couldn't shake the weight of guilt. In a quiet moment by the restaurant service station, he confided in a coworker named Yasmin. "It just wasn't right," he lamented. "Why wouldn't they just check the reservation carefully? We all know mistakes happen in the system, but Mr. Cole didn't even try." Yasmin sighed, casting a furtive glance to ensure no managers were within earshot. "I know," she replied softly, "but we can't rock the boat too much. They'll have us out on the street." Still, she understood the moral conflict brewing inside Colton. "Sometimes it's better to keep your head down," she added, though her voice lacked conviction. In a corner booth, Veronica Langford typed furiously on her laptop. Though she was there to cover a business magnate's engagement dinner, the notes she compiled contained barely anything about the couple. Instead, page after page detailed the humiliating fiasco she had witnessed. The hush-hush conversation around prejudice in high society was a topic she had tackled before. "This might just be the story of the evening," she murmured. Veronica planned to investigate further, see if she could track down the gentleman who was so unceremoniously tossed out. Something about his calm dignity amid such vicious treatment made her suspect there was more to his story. Meanwhile, Christopher maintained a facade of cool composure, though his mind buzzed with anxious thoughts. He disliked any potential bad press that could jeopardize the majestic Rose's reputation. His superiors prized the restaurant's standing among New York's elite. A scandal about racial discrimination would be catastrophic. So he made a mental note to spin the narrative if needed. perhaps labeling Horace as a troublemaker who tried to con his way in. Around 10:00 p.m., the crowd began to thin. Half-empty wine glasses littered the tables, remnants of caviar sat untouched, and the hum of conversation dwindled. Yet despite the hush, a shadow lingered over the establishment, a sense that something had transpired that could not be easily dismissed. Late that same night, Veronica Langford typed up her column at her small home office. She lived in a modest apartment near Times Square, convenient for her job, but not as luxurious as one might expect for a New York Times reporter. She didn't mind, she was more focused on her work than on lavish living. She found herself replaying the scene with Horace. She recalled the kindness in his voice and the quiet dignity with which he handled the situation. "I need more details," she told herself, pushing aside her half-eaten salad. She decided to call Colton, having managed to discreetly get his number when he was clearing her table. It took some persuading, but eventually Colton divulged everything he knew: the email from Horace Templeton, the possible glitch in the reservation system, and his own suspicion that the restaurant staff had deliberately dismissed Horace due to his appearance. Veronica thanked him and hung up, her heart pounding. If Horace had indeed booked a table, then the Majestic Rose, and specifically Christopher, had not only refused to verify it, but humiliated a paying customer. In the current climate, such a story could explode across social media and news outlets, but Veronica wanted more than a sensational headline. She wanted to uncover the truth about Horace Templeton. She started scouring public records and social media. She found numerous individuals named Horace Templeton, but only a handful fit the older demographic. Then she came across a short biography on an academic website. Dr. Horace Templeton, a former professor of engineering at Howard University, now involved in various tech startups and philanthropic projects. No picture accompanied the bio, but his credentials were impressive. She realized she might be on the right trail. The website detailed how Dr. Templeton had once been a key patent holder for a breakthrough in wireless technology. Now he was rumored to funnel profits into community centers and scholarships. Could this be the same man who had been kicked out of a restaurant just hours ago? Veronica's journalistic instincts roared into action. "Tomorrow," she said aloud, closing her laptop, "I'm going to find him. And if this is the same Dr. Templeton, the Majestic Rose is in for quite a scandal." She turned off her desk lamp, her mind swirling with the possibilities and the moral implications of revealing the restaurant's blatant discrimination. Early the next morning, Horace stood on the rooftop terrace of his townhouse, sipping coffee while gazing across the sprawling Manhattan skyline. He found solace in the morning light, a calm interlude before another busy day. The humiliation from the previous night still tugged at him, but he refused to let it define his mood. He had important meetings to attend. Before he could finish his coffee, his phone buzzed a text from Maurice Devereaux. "Dr. Templeton, I've just confirmed your attendance for the charity gala. The Majestic Rose is going to handle the catering. They don't know about you yet, but we'll reveal you as our surprise guest of honor. Should be spectacular." Horace's lips twitched into a faint smile. "The Majestic Rose," he murmured. "They'll certainly be surprised." He quickly dressed in a tailored suit, this one in far better condition than the older one he'd worn the night before. Horace believed in living simply, but dressed sharply when occasion demanded. As he closed his front door and made his way to the Bentley waiting outside, he thought about how fleeting first impressions could be. For many, appearances were everything, but Horace knew the power of quiet resilience. Meanwhile, across town, Veronica woke up to the shrill ring of her alarm. She dressed hurriedly, mind buzzing with plans to locate Dr. Templeton. She would start with a LinkedIn search, maybe see if he had any corporate ties in the city. Armed with a notebook and her press credentials, she hopped on the subway, heading toward Midtown. She intended to knock on doors, make calls, and do whatever it took to confirm the identity of this Horace Templeton. At around 10:00 a.m., Veronica arrived at a steel and glass office building. The lobby directory listed several tech startups, one of which, Quantum Wave Innovations, had once been linked to a Dr. Horace Templeton. She stepped into the elevator, nerves tingling. A short while later, she was talking to a receptionist who knew nothing about Horace's whereabouts. "Dr. Templeton consults with us occasionally, but he isn't in today," the receptionist said politely. Veronica left her card, hoping for a callback if the consultant reappeared. By lunchtime, Veronica had made little progress. but her determination was unwavering. Something about Horace's quiet dignity had left a mark on her conscience, and she was convinced that this was more than just a story about discrimination. It was a story about how quick judgments could have serious repercussions. If she could just confirm that the man kicked out of the Majestic Rose was indeed Dr. Horace Templeton, she would have proof of how a world-class restaurant had turned away a brilliant philanthropist purely based on superficial judgments. Horace's day was equally hectic. He spent the morning at a local community center in Harlem, where he was funding a new computer lab for underprivileged kids. The center's director, Miss Valerie King, greeted him warmly. "Dr. Templeton, thank you for coming. The children are so excited to have new technology. They've heard rumors that you invented something crucial to today's smartphones." Horace chuckled modestly. "I was part of a team that developed some of the wireless protocols you use every day. I'm just happy to give back." He navigated the rows of shiny new computers, greeting children who were learning basic programming. The joy on their faces buoyed his spirits, a stark contrast to the disdain he'd encountered at the Majestic Rose. After concluding his visit, Horace stepped outside to find Benjamin waiting with the Bentley. They were about to head downtown for another meeting when something caught Horace's eye. A figure hovered near the community center's entrance, Veronica Langford. She clutched a notepad, scanning the area as though searching for someone. For a moment, Horace considered walking the other way. He preferred to keep a low profile, but curiosity, and perhaps the memory of her concern the night before, drew him in. He approached her cautiously. "Pardon me, Miss Langford, wasn't it?" he asked. Startled, she spun around. Recognition lit her face. "Mr. Templeton," she exclaimed, then corrected herself. "Dr. Templeton, the first presume." Horace inclined his head. "Yes, but how did you find me?" Veronica wasted no time explaining that she was a journalist who had been at the Majestic Rose during the incident. She wanted to write a piece about what had happened and believed that learning more about Horace's background was crucial to contextualizing the story. "I felt it was blatant discrimination," she stated plainly, "and I believe people should know the truth." Horace studied her, noting the sincerity in her eyes. He appreciated her empathy, but he was also wary of turning personal matters into sensational headlines. Still, something told him that perhaps shining a light on the incident could help prevent future injustices. "All right," he said at last, "but I prefer you handle this sensitively. My life is more than just that one unfortunate evening." Veronica nodded. "Of course. Thank you for giving me this chance." Horace then offered her his business card, which contained a personal email address. "We'll talk more soon," he promised. With that, they parted ways, each feeling a strange sense of anticipation about what might unfold next. That evening, Christopher Cole attended a private gathering at a Midtown lounge known for its exclusive clientele. He met with a few colleagues from other high-end restaurants to network and gossip about the city's culinary scene. They swapped stories about difficult customers and star-studded events, boasting of celebrity sightings and lavish parties. Over a glass of vintage Bordeaux, Christopher entertained them with his account of the old man fiasco. He omitted the details that hinted at discrimination, instead spinning a tale of how a suspicious individual tried to sneak into the Majestic Rose. He nearly broke a $500 bottle of Dom Perignon. Christopher scoffed, ignoring how Horace had apologized and that it was largely the result of being forcibly ushered out. The group laughed heartily, each echoing the sentiment that such restaurants had to remain exclusive. Unbeknownst to Christopher, a few seats away sat a young woman who recognized his name from the swirling rumors on social media. She was a local blogger, known for her scathing reviews of businesses that discriminated against people. She eavesdropped, capturing key quotes on her phone. Her eyes glittered with the promise of exposing hypocrisy. Meanwhile, at his townhouse, Horace sat before a fireplace, logs crackling softly. He was reviewing his schedule for the upcoming charity gala. The event would take place in 2 weeks, with the Majestic Rose handling the catering off-site. The irony was not lost on him. They'll be forced to serve the man they humiliated, he mused quietly. Yet he didn't relish revenge. Horace simply believed that accountability was necessary. He contemplated emailing Maurice about the fiasco, but decided to wait. Maybe this was fate's way of setting the stage for a teachable moment. Instead, Horace browsed an online forum discussing philanthropic efforts in New York. He found posts praising a local journalist, Veronica, for tackling issues of racial bias and inequality. The notion of an ally in high media circles comforted him. If change was to happen, it wouldn't be through silent acquiescence. Perhaps his story, combined with Veronica's platform, might nudge society forward, even just a little. Late into the night, Horace typed an email to Veronica, agreeing to an exclusive interview. He didn't know how big a storm was brewing, but he sensed that something bigger than a single restaurant's prejudice was about to unfold. Within days, a quiet buzz emerged in certain media circles about a potential expose on the Majestic Rose. Veronica had kept her investigations discreet, but a few hints had leaked. When Christopher caught wind of it through the grapevine, he grew anxious. He called an emergency meeting with Madison and the restaurant's PR consultant, a polished woman named Celeste. They gathered in Christopher's corner office, an opulent space lined with accolades for the Majestic Rose. So Christopher began tersely. "I've heard rumors that a journalist might be writing a piece about the incident with that old man. We need to shut this down or at least spin it favorably." "Suggestions?" His gaze flickered between Madison and Celeste. Madison, who still felt justified in her actions, sniffed disdainfully. "She can't have much on us. He wasn't on the reservation list. That's the truth. It's not our fault he got physical and knocked over that champagne tray." Celeste shot her a warning look. "I've seen the security footage, Madison, and while it doesn't have audio, it doesn't exactly support your version. Also, social media scuttlebutt says some staff members overheard derogatory remarks." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "We need a plan. Publicly, we can claim it was a misunderstanding, but privately, we must ensure no employees speak out of turn." Christopher nodded, pressing his fingers to his temple. "We'll do damage control. I'll offer to meet with this journalist, see if we can steer the narrative. Our brand is high-end sophistication. We can't afford a scandal." Meanwhile, Colton overheard fragments of this meeting from the hallway. His heart sank. He worried they'd pin the blame on Horace or spin lies to protect themselves. Debating what to do, he decided to slip away quietly, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping. Colton's conscience nagged at him. He had the power to confirm Horace's reservation. The email was still somewhere in the restaurant system, if only he could produce it before they accidentally deleted it. Far from the Majestic Rose's plush offices, Horace and Veronica finally met in person for an in-depth interview. She set up a small voice recorder on a coffee table in Horace's townhouse. He recounted the events calmly, though his voice trembled slightly when describing how people had laughed at him. Veronica asked pointed questions about his background, philanthropic efforts, and future plans, particularly the upcoming gala. By the end of the interview, she had enough material to pen a revealing article that would leave readers both outraged and deeply moved. The day Veronica's article went live in the digital edition of the New York Times, an immediate ripple of reactions coursed through social media. The headline was carefully crafted: "Quiet Philanthropist or Get Lost. The Hidden Cost of Prejudice at New York's Elite Dining Spots." The piece outlined Horace's credentials: a former engineering professor, a tech pioneer, and a supporter of underprivileged youth. It then vividly described how he was humiliated at the Majestic Rose. Within hours, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram teemed with outrage. Some users pledged never to dine at the Majestic Rose again. Others shared personal stories of discrimination in upscale settings. The hashtags #StandWithHorace and #MajesticRose scandal began trending locally. TV networks started calling Veronica for interviews, eager to delve deeper into the story. Christopher, in a damage control frenzy, arranged an urgent press conference, intending to downplay the incident as a regrettable misunderstanding. He wore a somber expression when local news reporters questioned him. "We at the Majestic Rose deeply regret any inconvenience that may have occurred," he declared, carefully avoiding the words discrimination or racial bias. Madison stood behind him, stone-faced, while Celeste hovered nearby, ready to pull him away if the questions got too heated. However, the press conference took an unexpected turn when one reporter asked, "We have sources saying Dr. Templeton is the same man scheduled to attend the upcoming charity gala. Does the Majestic Rose plan to serve him there?" Christopher's face tightened, and for a fraction of a second, he seemed speechless. Finally, he forced a tight smile. "The Majestic Rose always serves all patrons with the utmost respect," he said, a hollow ring to his words. Meanwhile, Horace watched the coverage from his living room. He had mixed feelings. On the one hand, he believed exposure was necessary to push for change. On the other, he disliked the attention. He sipped tea, tension coiling in his stomach. "It's out of my hands now," he murmured to Benjamin, who stood nearby, ready to help in whatever way needed. "All I can do is keep moving forward." By evening, calls and texts poured into Horace's phone, some from old acquaintances offering support, some from media outlets begging for interviews. He politely declined most offers, citing that Veronica's article already covered what needed to be said. Yet deep down, he knew the biggest moment of public reckoning would be at the charity gala. There, face to face with the Majestic Rose's staff, the truth would meet the consequences. As the date of the charity gala approached, both anticipation and dread swelled. The venue was the historic Metropolitan Grand Hall, famed for hosting events that drew celebrities, politicians, and cultural icons. Stained glass windows and gilded arches gave the hall a regal air, while staff bustled to prepare sumptuous tables for the evening's festivities. Behind the scenes, Maurice Devereaux frantically coordinated final details with the Majestic Rose's catering team. Tensions ran high among the caterers. Many recognized the fiasco swirling around their establishment. Some worried that their presence would taint the event. Others grumbled about having to serve the very man they had once scorned. Yet the show had to go on. Horace arrived early, stepping out of the Bentley with unassuming grace. He wore a tailored navy suit, his posture exuding confidence. The hush that settled over the staff was almost palpable. Some recognized him from the news coverage. Others gawked at the realization that the man they'd ridiculed was the evening's distinguished guest. Word spread quickly that Dr. Horace Templeton, the philanthropist, was indeed the same individual they'd turned away. In a private dressing room, Horace was greeted by Maurice, who nearly bowed in apology. Dr. Templeton, the first mortified by what happened. "If I'd known you were going to dine at the Majestic Rose that night," Horace held up a hand, cutting him off gently. "Please, Maurice, you owe me no apology. You didn't do anything wrong. The staff's judgment does not reflect on you." Maurice, visibly relieved, nodded and went on to explain the evening's schedule. Horace would be introduced halfway through the program as a special guest, at which point he'd deliver a brief speech about the importance of community support. Meanwhile, Christopher and Madison had arrived with the catering team. Their hearts pounded as they realized Horace was already on site. They exchanged furtive glances, dread creeping in. With so many VIPs in attendance, and after the recent media firestorm, they knew their every move was under scrutiny. As the elegant crowd filtered into the grand hall, Horace mingled with guests who showered him with gratitude for his philanthropic work. He offered modest smiles, preferring to shift conversations toward the charities benefiting from the evening's auction. From the corner of his eye, he could see Christopher standing stiffly behind a buffet station, trying to remain inconspicuous. The air crackled with unspoken tension, a silent countdown to the moment of reckoning that would inevitably arrive. When the gala officially began, the master of ceremonies welcomed attendees to an evening of generosity and celebration. Jazz music floated through the hall, played by a live band stationed near the stage. Waitstaff circulated with silver trays of champagne flutes and petite canapes, each more exquisite than the last. Yet, no matter how beautiful the surroundings, nearly everyone felt a simmering undercurrent of expectancy. Seated at a round table near the stage were Maurice, Veronica, Leonard Blackwood, the lawyer who had witnessed Horace's humiliation at the bar, and a few other prominent figures. An empty seat awaited Horace. The conversation at the table was hushed but crackling with intrigue. Leonard shook his head. "I still can't believe that old man they tried to kick out was Dr. Horace Templeton." If only they had known. Veronica, tapping a slender finger on her wineglass, said, "Yes, the question is, how will this all play out now that they do know?" She caught sight of Horace from across the room, speaking politely with a group of business investors who admired his technological innovations. The older man wore an expression of calm, though his eyes occasionally flicked to the catering staff, perhaps a quiet acknowledgement of the storm they all now found themselves in. Eventually, the lights dimmed, signaling the night's main program. People found their seats, and the MC welcomed Maurice Devereaux to the podium to speak about the purpose of the gala, raising funds for community centers in underprivileged neighborhoods, educational scholarships, and skill-building programs. Polite applause followed. Maurice took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice resonating through the hall, "this evening is dedicated to uplifting our communities. And tonight we have a very special guest who personifies generosity and resilience." The crowd leaned in. He's a man whose humble demeanor contrasts sharply with his immense impact. You've likely read about his philanthropic works, and perhaps more recently you've heard his name in connection with certain controversies. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Horace Templeton. A spotlight swept across the room, settling on Horace's table. Slowly, he rose to a standing ovation. The applause thundered, some cheering even louder due to the recent news stories. He walked toward the stage, shoulders set with quiet determination. As he mounted the steps, a hush descended, as though everyone understood that an important moment was about to unfold. On one side of the hall, Christopher and Madison stood frozen in place, hearts pounding, fully aware that this was the same man they had told to get lost. Horace stood at the podium, gazing out at the sea of faces, some brimming with admiration, others flushed with shame. He gently cleared his throat. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this warm reception. Truth be told, I'm not used to such fanfare. I prefer to let my work speak for itself." A soft chuckle rippled through the audience. He paused, glancing down at his notes. "But tonight, I want to address something that's been swirling around the news. Yes, I am the same individual who recently had an unfortunate experience at a certain high-end restaurant." A wave of murmurs spread through the crowd. Cameras flashed, capturing the tension. Horace raised a hand to calm them. "I'm not here to chastise or embarrass anyone. Rather, I hope to share a lesson I've learned over a lifetime. It's easy to judge a book by its cover, and far too often, society's covers are tinted by prejudice." His gaze flicked to Christopher and Madison, who stood stiffly in their catering uniforms. Eyes lowered, he continued, his voice resonating with quiet intensity. "I didn't come from money. My parents worked multiple jobs so I could attend decent schools. I devoted my life to technology, specifically innovations that help connect people across the globe. Ironic, perhaps, given how disconnected some of us can be on a personal level. The success I achieved was not something I flaunted, but something I believed could lift others." At that, he shared stories of the scholarships he'd funded and the community programs he sponsored. He spoke about the small victories that meant everything to the people who benefited. A child who learned to code and later earned a full college scholarship, a single mother who gained job skills to secure a better future for her family. As we gather in this magnificent hall, he said, "I want us to remember, appearances can be deceiving. The person you dismiss might be the one who can help you soar higher than you ever dreamed. And more importantly, every person deserves respect, not because they're wealthy or accomplished, but because they're human." Polite applause burgeoned into a roaring ovation. Many stood to honor his words, while Christopher and Madison remained rooted, their cheeks burning with a mix of guilt and confusion. Horace bowed slightly, acknowledging the audience's warmth. Then he exited the stage, greeted by a line of people wanting to shake his hand or express thanks. In that moment, the moral weight of the story sank deeper into every witness's heart. As soon as Horace stepped off the stage, Maurice introduced the next segment of the gala, the charity auction. But the focus on auction items felt secondary to the emotional charge left by Horace's speech. Attendees whispered among themselves, exchanging glances of recognition that they had just witnessed a watershed moment. Christopher tried to slip away, but Maurice politely caught him before he could vanish behind the curtains. Mr. Cole, Maurice said in a low, pointed tone, I believe Dr. Templeton would like to speak with you. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a directive wrapped in polite civility. Madison lingered nearby, dread pooling in her stomach. Resigned, Christopher approached Horace. The older man waited calmly, arms at his sides, no sign of animosity in his posture. Madison joined them, anxiety etched on her face. For a moment they stood there, the tension thick as the hush of a culminating scene in a play. Horace broke the silence. Mr. Cole, Miss Madison. I believe we've met before, though, under less pleasant circumstances. His tone was measured, giving no clue to whether he felt anger or forgiveness. Madison opened her mouth to speak, but words failed her. Christopher cleared his throat. Dr. Templeton, I want to apologize for any misunderstanding. We, didn't realize, Horace held up a hand, that I was wealthy, that I could afford to eat at your restaurant. His question was as gentle as it was piercing. Christopher's face flushed. Madison fiddled nervously with her uniform's lapel. I suppose we made assumptions, Christopher admitted, each word weighted with regret. Taking a measured breath, Horace said, I won't deny the humiliation I felt, but this is bigger than me. Your staff, your policies, are they designed to welcome all people, or just those you deem acceptable? I hope you'll reflect on this and consider how you treat others in the future. He turned to Madison, who nodded quickly, tears brimming in her eyes, though she fought to maintain composure. I'm so sorry, Dr. Templeton, she stammered. I misjudged you. Horace offered a small nod, acknowledging her apology without entirely absolving her. He then glanced at Christopher. If your establishment is willing, perhaps we can discuss how to improve your protocols to be more inclusive. Not for me, but for everyone else who might face similar treatment. The manager swallowed hard, nodding. We'd appreciate that. Truly. With that, the tension seemed to dissipate, replaced by a hopeful note of understanding. Horace inclined his head, then stepped away to rejoin the event, leaving Christopher and Madison standing there, awed by his graciousness and astounded by the magnitude of their error. The remainder of the gala unfolded with spirited bidding on auction items, signed memorabilia, vacation packages, exclusive experiences. Spurred by Horace's words, guests donated generously, with the final tally exceeding expectations. Veronica, observing from the sidelines, noted how the energy in the room seemed transformed. People were kinder, more open, as if reminded that philanthropy was not just about money but about human decency. Shortly before the event concluded, Horace was once again in demand, this time by a cadre of local politicians who wanted to meet him, but he deftly excused himself, slipping away to a quieter corner. Veronica found him standing by a column, his gaze on the bustling crowd. Congratulations, Dr. Templeton. Tonight's success is due in no small part to you. He shrugged modestly. The success is for the community. That's what matters. After a pause, he added, Thank you for writing that article. Though I never sought the limelight, I believe your piece will open some eyes. They shared a reflective silence before Veronica asked, What do you think will happen with the Majestic Rose now? Christopher and Madison apologized, but do you trust them to change? Horace considered the question. Change isn't immediate, Miss Langford. It takes consistent effort. My hope is that this experience will be a catalyst for them and others to examine their biases and shift their policies. Whether or not they follow through remains to be seen. She nodded, sensing there was more he wanted to say. Indeed, Horace went on, punishing them won't solve the larger issue. We should hold them accountable, yes, but also guide them toward a better path. If they choose not to follow it, that's on them. But at least we can say we tried. The lights in the hall brightened slightly, signaling that the gala's official program was over. People began streaming toward the exits, collecting coats and exchanging farewells. Veronica and Horace shook hands warmly, promising to keep in touch. As Horace made his way to the exit, he observed Christopher, Madison, and some of the Majestic Rose's staff packing up their catering equipment. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, an unspoken acknowledgement that in one humiliating evening, an entire worldview had been challenged. Horace nodded politely, then slipped into the Bentley that Benjamin had waiting outside. Gliding into the night, He felt a quiet sense of completion. Justice had been served, not in the form of vengeance, but through exposure, conversation, and the potential for lasting change. A week later, the Majestic Rose found itself in a whirlwind of both negative and cautious positive attention. On one hand, reservations dropped significantly as word spread of the discrimination scandal. On the other hand, some believed the restaurant's management might evolve. Eager to mitigate the fallout, the restaurant announced new training programs emphasizing diversity and inclusion. They invited consultants to overhaul their policies, from how they verified reservations to how they treated walk-in guests. Christopher Cole was placed on temporary administrative leave, pending a review of how he handled the incident. For the first time in years, he found himself with ample free hours. He used them to reflect on how a single moment of prejudice could unravel a career. He considered reaching out to Horace to thank him for his magnanimity, though he hesitated, unsure if the gesture would be welcomed. Madison was reassigned to a different role, away from the direct line of customer greeting. She had lost much of her previous haughtiness, replaced by an air of contrition. Late at night, she scrolled through social media posts lambasting the Majestic Rose, feeling a pang of regret for her part in the fiasco. She even considered quitting, but a small voice inside urged her to stay and become part of the solution, to atone. Colton, the young server, became something of a local hero among certain circles. People admired him for trying to speak up. With the shift in management, he was able to produce the archived email reservation from Horace Templeton, vindicating Horace fully. The documents also showed that staff had received multiple confirmations, but either ignored or deleted them. This revelation further fueled calls for accountability. Across town, Horace went about his life largely unchanged by the media storm. He spent his days attending board meetings for tech startups, visiting community centers, and quietly planning future philanthropic ventures. Despite the swirl of attention, he remained unassuming, still taking the Bentley, but never flaunting his wealth. From time to time, he received messages from strangers, some offering admiration, others sharing their own experiences of discrimination. Horace responded whenever he could, encouraging them to stay hopeful and stand up for themselves. Meanwhile, Veronica continued to cover the story's aftermath, penning follow-up articles highlighting the Majestic Rose's attempts to reform. Some lauded their efforts, others dismissed them as performative. Yet, no matter how the public perceived it, there was no denying that one act of discrimination, exposed to the world, had set a series of transformations in motion. 2 months later, a curious invitation arrived in Horace's mailbox. It was from the Majestic Rose, now under the interim leadership of a new general manager. The elegant card bore a simple yet significant message. "We cordially invite you, Dr. Horace Templeton, to experience our newly reformed hospitality. Dinner for 2 on us, with our sincerest apologies." Horace arched an eyebrow, torn between letting the past rest and seizing the opportunity to see if genuine change had taken root. After much deliberation, he decided to accept. Accompanied by Veronica, who wanted to document the follow-up, he arrived at the restaurant on a quiet Tuesday night. This time, everything was different. The hostess greeted him warmly, immediately confirming his reservation. The staff offered gracious smiles and pulled out chairs for them at a prime table near the grand piano. The meal progressed without incident. Courses flowed seamlessly. Truffled scallops, seared filet mignon, and a dessert sampler that dazzled the senses. The new manager, a soft-spoken woman named Rebecca Torres, introduced herself halfway through dinner to personally apologize on behalf of the establishment. "Dr. Templeton," she said, "we've instituted new training protocols, revised our reservation system, and taken disciplinary measures against those who acted inappropriately. We can't undo the past, but we can learn from it." Horace thanked her, acknowledging the shift in atmosphere. Even Veronica was impressed by the noticeable improvements in customer service and staff diversity. Some of the same waiters from Horace's first visit now carried themselves with a different energy, respectful and genuine. When the check arrived labeled complimentary, Horace quietly placed a generous tip on the tray. "I appreciate your gestures," he told Rebecca, "but real change isn't proven in one evening. It's an ongoing process. I hope you'll continue this path long after tonight." Rebecca nodded, promising they would. As Horace and Veronica exited into the crisp night air, They passed the exact spot where, weeks ago, Horace had been told to get lost. The memory lingered, but this time it was tempered by a renewed sense of hope. In the weeks that followed, Horace and the majestic Rose maintained a cautious but cordial relationship. Though no one could rewrite the indignity he'd endured, the ramifications had stretched far, prompting introspection, reformation, and a ripple effect in the wider dining industry. Newspapers ran editorials about how to treat customers fairly, and other upscale venues began reviewing their own practices, wary of a similar scandal. And so, in the end, the man they once laughed at helped reshape the very world that had tried to dismiss him. Thank you for joining us on this remarkable journey of respect, redemption, and the power of standing up for what's right. The story of Horace Templeton reminds us that true character transcends appearances, and that every act of kindness or cruelty can send ripples far beyond a single moment. By shedding light on prejudice and demanding accountability, we can transform injustice into an opportunity for meaningful change. If you found this story compelling, please consider hitting the like button and sharing it with others who might need a reminder that empathy and respect should come before assumptions. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire, challenge, and uplift. Together, let's keep championing fairness and compassion wherever we go. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next video.